Just want to say thank you for joining today. I'm Carey Ransom, and I am currently the president of a new venture studio here called OC4. And we're working with early stage founders to really help them get their product and business headed off in the right direction. As we say, we talk about OC4 with 4 C's. Capital is a key part of getting a business going, but also coaching collisions with the right talent and opportunities and being part of a community. And so that's really what we're trying to build together. Zac and I have known each other for quite a while. We also are both UCLA Bruins proudly, and I think there are a number of those on the Zoom today as well. And Zac and I, when we worked together several years ago, he took me and the team that I was leading at the time through a really interesting project focusing on customer needs. And we were looking at some potential product opportunities. And instead of starting with the idea, instead of starting with the name or the product, we started with really deeply understanding customer needs. And I will say that, from that experience, I really developed some religion around this process, and also this belief that when starting a product journey, or even the idea of starting a company, which is what we're doing at OC4, or helping people at the earliest stages, this is a really robust way that will increase in my opinion, increase the likelihood of success. And I asked Zac if he would take a group of us through this, because I think it's something that a lot of founders or prospective founders can use to better hone their thinking. And the way that I tend to think about it is, at worst, it validates some of your instincts and you've invested some time to validate. At best, it helps you deeply understand this customer that you hope to serve and their needs at a much better level, and saves you from going down a path that you probably shouldn't have gone down. And so Zac's going to share a lot about that. And so we're going to go through a process for how you can uncover customer needs, really how you can better define what is called a job, and this notion of jobs to be done. And he's been doing this for a long, long time. And then, we'll talk about how we believe you can use it within a startup, or if you're inside a bigger company and thinking about a new project, how to apply it. So with that, I want to let Zac do a quick introduction of himself as well.
Thank you, Carey. Yeah, just a real brief introduction on me. My name again is Zac Lyons, and I'm the founder of Agile Innovation Advisors. And I've been helping companies really identify market opportunities for about 15 years now. I actually haven't always been a consultant. If you remember that commercial about the hair care club, I was a member, plus I started the company. Well, I was actually a product manager at Intuit way back in the day. I was tasked with developing a new version of TurboTax for millennials who at the time were just entering into the workforce. And I was lucky because Intuit was a great place to kind of cut my teeth as a product manager. And I learned a lot about the wrong and right ways to build great products. And from that experience, I fell in love with jobs to be done, and haven't looked back, been doing it ever since. And so I'm really happy to be here sharing some insights, and hopefully you guys will have some things you can take away right away. Even the thinking, hopefully, in this presentation will change your mindset and get you guys on the right path. That's the hope.
All right. So the big thing that we really want to help people try to avoid, and it's something that I've been through many, many times in my startup career, is the often known as the pivot. And so just to set the stage a little bit, we thought we would share a video. For many of you, if you haven't had time, you can catch up on some Silicon Valley episodes, but this is a pretty funny tidbit about the pivot.
Hey guys, I just had a thought. Okay, so this is it, right? A lot of successful startups launched with a different business model. And when they ran into trouble, they pivoted to something new, right? Like Instagram, that was a location-based check-in service when it started, and then they pivoted. Or chat roulette, okay? That was social media, and then they pivoted to become a playground for the sexually monstrous. We just need a new idea, something that people want, right? We can pivot to.
Dude, you are fucked up right now.
Yeah, you're pinning bad.
Well, I'll admit I'm sleep challenged. I just spent 4 days trapped in a steel box out on an oil rig full of robot forklifts. So that was hard, but I'm back. I am recovering, and I am focused, and we're gonna pivot. Don't lose faith, guys, right? Look at me, look at me, look at me. We've got a great name, we've got a great team, we've got a great logo, and we've got a great name. Now we just need an idea. Let's pivot. Let's pivot. Hi. I'd like to talk to you about a company called Pied Piper. What does it do? Good question. Maybe you can help us find an answer. What if Pied Piper was an app that could attract rodents? You know, like the fairy tale for purposes of extermination or to feed your pet snake. We're not here to tell you what to do with your rats. We're here to get you rats stat. Would you be very interested, somewhat interested, or not interested? Which one? Which one? Which one? You've heard the phrase, time to pay the piper, right? What if there was an app called Pied Piper that could tell you to a statistical degree of certainty whether you were going to heaven or hell? Very interested, somewhat interested, not interested. Which one? Which one? Which one? How much would it be worth to you if I told you I had a GPS app called Pied Piper tracking the location of your child? I can follow your child anywhere, and there is nothing you can do to stop me. Most missing children are never found. Interested, very interested, or very interested.
Have any weapons or drugs on your person at this time?
Why, yes. Yes, I do.
Let's go. Adderall. This is a highly controlled substance. Are these yours?
No, those belong to an underage kid that I brought to my house.
Yeah, sir. I'm gonna have to ask you to come with me.
It's a kind invitation, but I have too much to do. I'm pivoting.
Let's go now.
No! I'm pivoting.
I'm gonna pursue you.
I'm pivoting.
Oh, sorry. That's funny. So, and maybe too real. So, you know, I think where a lot of people start is with this design sprint approach, which really is a great way once you know the problem that you need to solve. And so I think what Zac will take us through is that something like a design sprint has a great place in your process, but many times people start with the design sprint. And so what I've started to really realize as I talk to a lot of startup founders is this sort of starts with, in many cases, the solution first, or gets you to an early solution first. And what often I want to know after going through this as much as I have from a founder is, how did they get to this actually being the right problem to solve and something that mattered to people to warrant even spending the time to develop the solution? So as Zac would say, it's like putting the cart before the horse. Mm-hmm. So first you need to figure out that this is something worth solving, worth spending time on. So there are, Zac, do you want to maybe continue? So there are some other ways that people will start first as well, is they'll build a product roadmap, which is somewhat like divinely, hey, these are all the features that we should be adding. I've inherited those product roadmaps before. I've developed product roadmaps before. Or we just start building new features. I'll allow the organization to remain nameless, but I was part of an organization where features were just assigned to be built without any real concern for whether they were valuable or worth doing. It just was sort of the confusing busyness for progress or activity. Or sometimes just executing a marketing campaign can be, we're going to tell people what they should think or care about. And so I would say we you know, in this case, none of those really is a replacement for solving real problems that customers have. So an additional option, and Zach, maybe, I don't know if you want to share the case study of Microsoft Office, but
Yeah, real quick. I've done actually a lot of work with Microsoft. It's interesting though, because they're sort of one of these companies that they continue to build new features upon new features. And as they put it in their own words, they're sort of developers building products for developers instead of for average everyday users. And the thing is, like Office, I started using back in the 90s. They've added many new features over the years, but it doesn't mean that the product has become better or even more useful for folks. In fact, for people who maybe still use it, I know a lot of people have switched to other solutions, often will curse it daily trying to figure out how to get things done or even how to find certain features or not even knowing that there's features in there. And so, the takeaway for you guys is really, to drive growth, to build a business, you have to know when to stop adding features to a product and really focus on what the customer needs. Go ahead, Gary.
So what a lot of people have resorted to there is say, well, we'll just ask customers. So how about we use something like NPS, right? We'll ask them what, would they recommend this? And that's a good way. Or they'll just do some customer interviews. And what I've learned in many cases is the simpler you design it, the simpler answer you're going to get. It's the classic, how did you hear about me? And I always think about that and go, well, I'm just going to give you the fastest answer. I don't care about your need to know how I heard about you. I care about getting my problem solved. And so I think a lot of people end up being that way. So that it's somewhat of a garbage in, garbage out situation, or you get vague or not very helpful inputs. And so, you might ask customers for some input and they may say, well, I'd like something that's easier to use, maybe that is more reliable or more convenient. Or they'll just, again, they'll be dismissive and say, oh, you're great. I love you. And then maybe an NPS score they give you is actually not very good because they're just not inclined to ever talk to other people or promote, right? So there's a lot of dissonance, and I think there are better ways. So I think Zach, has an example of where he's seen this as well.
Yeah, it does. It reminds me of a banking client of mine, who uses Net Promoter Score as their primary, or NPS as a primary method for actually salary and bonuses and such. And I asked a woman who was in charge of the call center, why, she was stressed out about her NPS scores. I said, why is that? And she said, well, the primary reasons given by their members, as they call them, because they're a credit union, other customers, for why they're unhappy with the call center is not the quality of the reps or the time it takes to get a hold of a human, what you would think of for a call center. It is, get this, they don't like the locations or hours of the branches. And of course, that has nothing to do with the call center. And that's sort of the point, right? So customers will speak in a language that's really convenient for them, but it often proves useless for determining how to improve your product or the customer experience. And as Carey alluded to, and as Jared was showing in that little video too, they rarely know the best solutions to their issues, and they can actually lead you astray with their comments, or in that video, lack of comments. So unfortunately, simply going out and talking to your customers is not really sufficient. It's really what you ask them and the inputs you capture that make a difference.
Okay, so we'll keep going. So another often used technique is to do personas and even using user stories as an approach to building things, especially when you're in an agile organization. But there definitely are questions about how effective this is on its own. And sometimes because the persona might just be as a fill in the blank, as a user or as an administrator, and in some cases is just not enough context or not enough depth. And I think it ends up having, in many cases, a lot of assumptions, or maybe too many assumptions. So for example, you say, as a user, I want to sign in to an application so that I can see how it works. That's so generic. Who's the user? What's their situation? What are they trying to accomplish? And so if you go to the next one, a potentially better approach is what's called a job story, because it ends up giving you a lot more context. The quote unquote job that they're trying to accomplish, it really starts to get to the heart of things like motivation, why, and what they're hoping to achieve. And we'll come back to this in a little bit. So at this point, I'm going to let Zac really dig in and share a lot more of this approach.
Thank you, Carey. And we'll build on that, come back to that job story and show you how you can actually build those fill in the blanks. So if your organization has adopted design sprints, as we've talked about, or agile product development, or any number of these, what I call solution first approaches, your whole approach really is to, when you're innovating new products, is to quickly come up with new solutions, throw them into the market, to test them quickly, hoping to, what most people call it, fail fast. I'm sure a lot of you have heard that term. And it's actually no wonder so many new products fail. And as I mentioned in the intro, I was a product manager at Intuit, and I actually almost did this exact thing. So we were faced with a new market opportunity, trying to create TurboTax for millennials, and we brainstormed 250 concepts. And I remember I had them all plastered up on the wall. We did this internally. And then I asked this consultant who we had hired to lead the brainstorming session, which idea or concept do I move forward with? And instead of helping me, she just shrugged and kind of said, good luck, as she took off to catch her flight. And so I realized the challenge that lay in front of us. And instead of wasting a lot of time and money testing all these ideas, pivoting, right, and doing those types of things, I went out and studied the needs of customers first. And as a result, our team was actually quite fairly simply be able to pick from these ideas that we had up on the wall, put them together into this concept that brought in 10,000 new customers in its first year and became the basis of my first patent. And in fact, a lot of the features we had come up with are now part of the core TurboTax 15 years later. It's still in there because it still satisfies customer needs. And so this is what we're proposing you to do to create your next great product. So here's how it works. First, through customer interviews, we'll map their journey and gather their needs for each step. Then we pinpoint which needs are the most significant in driving value for your customers. And then finally, we'll define and evaluate solutions with customers. And this is really what we call agile innovation. And it doesn't seem like that much of a tweak, but really by moving that define and evaluate solution step later, instead of doing that first, which is what many organizations and entrepreneurs do, it really changes the game in that. And I'll show you how that is as we go through this presentation. So let's start with gathering customer needs. Right? Having the right inputs, of course, is a key first step. But what do we gather? Well, what we don't do is sit around, and sometimes we get chuckles on this picture. What we don't do is sit around inside our company and pretend like we can come up with what our customers need or map their journey without actually going out and talking with them. And again, I'm sorry to say, but this is a very common practice. And in fact, this is what TD Bank was doing as they tried to increase deposits at their bank before we work with them. The other thing interesting is there's really no excuse to do this anymore, because with all the digital tools available, like Zoom, right, it's easier than ever to go out, reach out and talk to your customers, get outside the walls of your business, as they say. So instead, we put on customer lenses and define the journey that the customer is going through as the job they're trying to get done. Now, Carey's already alluded to job a little bit. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with the concept, so I'll just give a quick, brief introduction to jobs to be done. A job really is just a task, an activity, a goal. It's something you're trying to accomplish or achieve in your life. And we all have hundreds, maybe even thousands of jobs we're trying to get done. A perfect example is most of us have an iPhone or Android smartphone in our pockets, and we hire that solution to get many different jobs done. You can even think of each app in the app stores as a different job. So things like take a picture or maybe stay connected with friends or colleagues. If you ask my 13-year-old son, he would say he wants to share interesting content online or play video games. So these are all different jobs that people are trying to get done. The smartphone, the iPhone, the Android is just a solution or even a platform, if you will, to help you get that job done. Now, the reason we want to use this idea is that we want to make sure we map the journey from the customer's perspective not how the organization sees it. And that's one problem a lot of organizations have. They have an inside-out view of the world. So they look at the world through their lens. We want to look at the world through the lens of the customer. And we want to identify what it is they're trying to get done, what are the steps they have to go through in order to get the job done successfully. So we have this end-to-end view of what the customer is doing. So Carey, you want to share the job story here again?
So in a job story, we really simplify the situation and provide that context, right? What's the customer trying to do? What do they want to do? What they're hoping to accomplish? And here's, an example could be as a patient walks into an office. So you have a doctor who has a patient walking into the office. I want to be able to quickly see his or her information. I want to see their chart. I want to see what's going on so I can address him or her appropriately. And so in this case, the doctor is looking to hire something to help inform her, about the patient after surgery. She's looking to improve the patient experience. And there could be a number of different solutions to how that's accomplished. And so if you're talking to the doctor, you're going to get one point of view. If we looked at this job from the patient standpoint, we might realize, as an example, they actually don't want to go in. Their desire for the job, they want to hire something that prevents them from even having to go into the doctor's office altogether, right? So this is when you understand jobs better, you actually start to then understand the different people. And Zac will talk a little bit about different roles in the job. Sometimes we can accomplish a job all by ourselves. Sometimes there are other characters that are part of that.
The other reason that we want to focus on jobs is that customers are loyal to the job they're trying to get done, not our products and services. I'm sorry to say. Even if you're a product manager, I'm sure you love your product, but they're not loyal to that. You see, products and services are really point-in-time solutions that come and go, but jobs are very stable over time. They don't change much. And I'll show you an example in a minute, but customers will actually switch solutions when a new one helps them get the job done better, faster, or more affordably, thus providing them with a better customer experience. So for example, when it comes to the job of listening to recorded music, which I'm sure a lot of us are doing more of these days, right, being at home, here are a few solutions that have been used over the years, right? We have records, tapes, 8-tracks somewhere in there, CDs, MP3 players, streaming, and then who knows what. And what's amazing is there's not one record manufacturer, I don't know how many people were around back then, but there's not one record manufacturer who changed their solution to keep up with better ways of getting the job done. They saw themselves as record manufacturers. That's it. And the most successful organizations in the world are the ones who get this. They see themselves as helping people get a job done. And I sometimes get a question, well, is there any examples of companies that do it well? And there's a number of them, but obviously, I know Apple always gets held up as this icon of innovation, but if you think about it, even in this just small little example, they didn't invent the MP3, but they developed a winning MP3 player, the iPod, and then they switched to streaming when that became the bigger deal. And in fact, they don't even manufacture iPods anymore. So they've actually changed their solution when there was a better way that came along to help people get this job done more effectively. So to help illustrate a little more and make this more concrete, because I know we've been talking sort of at these high levels, I wanted to share with you an actual project we did for a client who had basically sold automotive CRM, or customer relationship management software, to car dealerships in Canada. And they were basically losing customers left and right. And they were trying to figure out, how do we innovate and stop the bleeding and then start growing? And so the first thing I said to them was, well, if you think about this, Canadian dealerships it's not a single market, right? As they sort of looked at it, and probably a lot of organizations look at it that way. Really, as you can see here, there's not one, but many different markets, because there's different constituents at the dealership, in this example, trying to get different jobs done. So for example, a consumer is trying to purchase or lease a vehicle, a sales manager is trying to provide vehicles for sale, a marketing manager has to manage marketing campaigns to drive leads to the dealership, a finance manager tries to provide auto financing, and so on. So there's all different, in a dealership's a perfect example, there's all these different constituents trying to get different jobs done. Related, of course, but different. So defining who your customer is, who you're trying to add value for, and what job or jobs they're trying to get done is critical to framing what you're going to study and understanding their needs. Now for this project, we actually focused on marketing managers, the new and used car sales managers, and finance managers, because they're all users of the CRM tools at the dealership. But for sake of time, let's just take a look at one of these, the marketing manager, to see what the results look like. So we first go out and talk with those who are trying to get the job done, of course, but what do we capture? Well, we know that our focus is on the customer job. Hopefully you've gotten that so far, and not on our product or service. And our goal is to uncover the customer's measures of success in getting a job done. We also know that customers want to complete the activities of a job quickly, predictably, and efficiently. These things can be articulated and measured. So this is what we capture when we go out and interview customers. These are the needs. So we don't do what Jared did, where we show a solution and browbeat them into giving us an answer. We talk to them about the job they're trying to get done and their measures of success along these dimensions as they go about doing the job. Very simple, at least in theory. So let's take a look at the job marketing managers are trying to get done when managing a marketing campaign. Because this is not a process map of what they're doing today, which I know a lot of people think when they see this. It's a job map, right? It's what they're trying to get done as they go through this job. And we put this together actually just through talking with about 7 to 10 marketing managers. And there's 3 phases in this job. I won't go through them all in detail. There's a lot more behind it, but basically, marketing managers, if anyone's a marketing manager on this call, this should relate. You have to plan the campaign, do a lot of thinking up front, and then you develop it by developing content and channels and making sure everything's ready, and then actually implementing and executing the campaign, launching it, monitoring, measuring, and such. And so as a result of this, we know marketing managers have needs that they're trying to satisfy for each step in this job. So just for example, when it comes to this first step of establishing objectives for a marketing campaign, we uncovered 11 needs through those 7 to 10 interviews we did. So the way to think about this is that these are all the things that marketing managers are trying to get done that enables them to successfully establish objectives for a marketing campaign. Or to put this into the job story format, when establishing objectives for a marketing campaign, I want to determine how much money is available to spend to achieve the objectives, for example. What's my budget, and et cetera. So another example, just so you can get a sense of it, when developing messaging content for a marketing campaign, we identified 8 needs that they're trying to get done. And when concluding the campaign, here we identified 6 activities they're trying to satisfy. So in total, for all 13 steps in the job, we uncovered 106 needs or measures of success in getting the job done. My point here is that that's a lot. It's a very granular view of what they're trying to get done as they go through this job. But we know that these are all of the customer needs. So there aren't other needs, there aren't unarticulated needs, as you may have heard that term thrown around quite a bit too, because we've mapped the job of managing a campaign from beginning to end, and each of the steps, we then capture their measures of success. The other thing is that as we capture these needs, you may notice as you look at them, they don't include solutions, they're free of solutions. So this set of needs will remain stable over time for basically as long as marketing managers are managing marketing campaigns. And the cool thing about this is that means you can use these measures over time to see how you're doing or how competitors are doing in the market, even as solutions change, because these become the anchors. This is what customers are trying to get done. The solutions that are developed and put out there, like a CRM tool or a marketing automation tool, right? All these solutions that evolve can change the satisfaction on these needs, of course, but the needs themselves are static. And so when we have this robust and granular and understanding of what marketing managers are trying to get done, we're now armed with a much better way to really identify opportunities to improve their experience and build great products. So how do we do that, right? I'm alluding to this pinpointing the opportunities. So what do we go do that? Well, we again go out and talk with those doing the job, but this time we ask them which needs are important and not well satisfied, ideally through an online survey to get statistical confidence, although you can also do that qualitatively as well to do it quicker. And then also to understand why we do in-depth interviews, to really understand root cause, and also to understand how these things are important and how they link up to these expected outcomes that we saw in the job story. So we're actually filling out the job story as we go through the methodology, right? We're trying to understand what they're trying to get done, in what context, and why it's important to them. And then also to understand root cause, so that as we think about solutions, we address those to actually move the needle on satisfaction. So what's important to keep in mind as we do innovation, and I come back to the job here, is that marketing managers, or anyone who's doing a job for that matter, needs to get the whole job done to be successful. It's not like you just do part of it or half of it. You really want to get the whole thing done. And you're going to judge your experience and how well you're able to get, as you use solutions, how well you're able to get it done. Does the solution help me get it done quickly, predictably, and efficiently? But that's a lot to focus on for any organization, let alone entrepreneurs with limited capital, limited budget, right? So we use insight from the prioritization to really help us uncover what will most move the needle from the customer's perspective, not what the organization thinks. So here's what that output of this effort looks like. Carey, you want to talk through the heat map here?
I mean, to me, this is the gold, folks. And, when Zac and I work together, this is where I just got so excited, because this is what's called the heat map. And each need is listed under each step in the job and color coded based on importance and level of satisfaction. So the ones that are red or dark orange are called value drivers. Those are the hot spots, if you will, in the heat map. In this case, the marketing manager's needs are, they're saying this is really important and frankly unmet. I'm not very satisfied. And they also are critical to getting the job done. And so as you think about opportunities for innovation, and what I talk a lot about, and Zac and I've talked a lot about, this notion of consumer or customer behavior change, people are going to be much more open to changing and adopting a new solution when it's a really important need and the current option of how to do it is unmet. And so I think we've been conditioned somewhat in the market of this idea of 10x better or 100x better solutions. But when people need something to get a job done and it's important in the process and the current solution isn't very good, I would argue in many cases it doesn't have to be 10 times better. It could just even be incrementally better. And so things that you already address well, if you see this as a need and it's unmet, you already do it well, maybe you don't have to build something new. Or maybe it's just not that important. If you are thinking about these and it lines up with maybe your roadmap, now all of a sudden, you probably want to prioritize these things ahead of others. And if you aren't addressing this today and you're already in business, or if you're thinking about a place to start, this is why I think it's so viable for startups, is if you're thinking about a place to start, you can really start to think about this in the context for the job or a part of the job or the whole job. And maybe this is your entry point because the pain is high and the importance is high. And this could be a place for you to start with a minimum viable solution.
So once you have the output of a study and we know what to focus on from the customer's perspective, as Carey just went through, well, how would you actually go about defining and evaluating solutions? So, Carey, you want to talk to this?
I can. So now we can do a design sprint, right? We've got a lot more input about the needs and the things that are important to people. And so to me, this gives us a much higher likelihood of success. And so we want to start to think about some ideas with more of a focus on what I would characterize as the problems that we want to solve, that are worth us spending time on, and we can get rapidly to a prototype, an MVP, and then take that back ideally to this same group of customers to get their feedback. So instead of really focusing on, we have to have one solution, maybe we test and try a few.
So I would say that design sprints are really powerful, but they're even better when you do a jobs to be done study ahead of time and use that as an input into doing a design sprint, because the clarity in which you go through the design sprint is so much better. It's amazing. So just a couple of other examples of a few clients I've worked with and some of the things they've been able to do as a result of using sort of the agile innovation process or approach. So First American, they have a division that actually helps with mortgage solutions. They're known for mostly title insurance, but they actually raised their NPS by 20 points in 6 months, which for those of you who don't know, Net Promoter Score, that's a huge increase in a short time. And really what they did was we painted a picture of the whole job that consumers are trying to get done when they refinance a mortgage. And they don't do the whole job. They only sort of help with pieces of it. But the job map helped them see where they play and where they don't. And as a result, one of the things they realized was consumers get really confused on who to call when they have questions if they go through a refi or even a purchase mortgage for that matter. And so they provided them with a cheat sheet of who to contact when they have a question. And they did a couple of those types of things. I wouldn't say they were earth-shattering innovations. They were just simple tools. But as they rolled those out, that made a huge difference in the customer experience. TD Bank, who I mentioned earlier, who's struggling with deposit growth until they created a new banking product that was called Simply Safe. It became the fastest adopted product in their history, and this is a 100-plus-year-old company. As a result of these insights that we provided them, and we studied the needs of consumers in saving and investing. And as a result of their idea, their concept was actually copied by Bank of America in the US. It was called Keep the Change, if any of you remember that marketing campaign. And then actually became I didn't know this actually recently, it became the basis of the fintech company Acorn. So they sort of copied this whole concept and moved it along. So what did it say? Flattery is, or copying is the highest form of flattery. So it's interesting how people copy each other. But TD Bank had that idea first. Lexmark, they launched the world's lowest in-cost printer after a project, really by positioning themselves uniquely. So here's an example of not innovating a new product, going back to the other thing, but really thinking about messaging and positioning. They found that the needs around printing were very well satisfied, but given consumers' overriding focus on printing costs, that as a result of the study, they actually priced their black ink at a penny per page, and it really helped them drive sales in a very crowded market of their products, simply by really positioning and messaging and doing a little bit of change on their pricing lever. So as a next step, and something to think about as a takeaway from this is, how can you apply this to your markets? Obviously, I'm available to help, but there's some ways to think about this is that, first of all, think about the markets you're in, either your company or maybe that you want to start. And think about all these different job doers that are around maybe your product or idea, and what job or jobs they're trying to get done. Like, what is it they're not using your product, but what are they trying to get done? Right? And once you have that, then you can start saying, okay, how do we do the job map? What are the steps in the job map? How do we identify their needs? In that, we have a number of tools and templates that we've developed over time to actually help people through this process, from framing that ecosystem, as I just showed, is what we called it, through doing customer interviews to map the job and the steps of the job and gather needs, so that people are able to do that. And I think we'll be able to, after this call, we'll figure out a way to get those to people who are registered if they're interested. So despite the robustness of this process, it really can be done very quickly. I know it sounds like a very involved process. How am I going to do this? Well, in about 2 weeks, you can conduct in-depth interviews with customers, map their job, and gather their needs. And again, that's a qualitative exercise. Then in 2 more weeks, you can pinpoint the value drivers and do this root cause and expected outcome analysis. And again, that can be done quantitatively or qualitatively, depending on your budget and willingness to get more statistical data. And then the define and evaluate solutions can be done as we've shown in 1 week design sprints. So as a result, in about 4 or 5 weeks, you'll have the metaphorical keys to the kingdom. You'll have this comprehensive understanding of the experience your customers want in terms of the job to be done, the value drivers, what really creates value for them, and then innovative solutions to address them.
And
the question
Zac,
I always ask is, where would you like to start?
yeah,
That's
Zac,
the really
I mean, one thing too, I mean, you just recently did this for one of our companies, and phase one, I think didn't even take 2 weeks. It was even a week. And some of that time lag is just having the time to schedule and talk with people.
Correct. Exactly. And the other thing I'll point out, that's a good point, Carey, is that each of the steps in this process adds value. So even if you're not able to go through all of these, even just starting with, okay, what is the job my customer is trying to get done? So getting outside of your head and thinking in terms of your customer and putting that lens on, as we talked about. And then, you know, what are the steps they have to get through? Okay, there's more than just using my product. There's other things they're doing perhaps before and after my product. And, you know, that's one of the things with one of the portfolio companies we realized what they're focused on is only one really small sliver of the overall job that these target audience is trying to do. And then if you continue on and pinpoint value drivers, it just adds to the insights you have that can help you make better and better decisions. So even just thinking in terms of jobs to be done can be beneficial.
That's right. So Zac, maybe it makes sense now to take your sharing off of the screen and putting video up in gallery so we can see people that have questions. I'll start with Richard's question. He put it in the chat. Thanks for doing that. So is this process more adapted to interviews after the current restrictions are over? Can you use surveys? So I'll give you my quick answer and then would love Zac's. You know, Richard, I think there are a number of different ways you can do the interviews. I have not done this yet. I think recently Zac, when he was doing them for one of our companies at OC4, those were not face-to-face, I don't believe. I think they were done in a virtual way. So I'll let him speak to that. I've done things in the past where I've recruited people off of Craigslist and had them come in and speak to me. And to do those interviews, because I was targeting a certain customer, I did screeners where they had to fill out a short questionnaire to qualify and then would ask them. And I think that could be done in this environment over something like Zoom as well. It's really just finding them, scheduling, and then having a way to conduct the interview. Zac, thoughts from your standpoint?
Yes. So customer interviews, so some market research would debate how you do them is critical. And I would argue it's not so much. It's more about asking the right questions and getting the right inputs. I've actually for a long time been doing them remotely via phone or doing Zoom calls. Because one of the benefits is it's easier to access people. You may want to get a diverse perspective from different geographies. You know, I've done interviews with customers in China and in Europe, and so that's not even really that feasible sometimes. And so I think it's better to move quickly, get those interviews, get the insights, ask the right questions, and then worry about being face to face. I understand when you're in the context of where your customer is, you can learn stuff. They call it contextual inquiry, right? But that's really a different, there's different objectives in doing that. That's really helpful when you're thinking about the solution you're trying to create. When you're trying to understand the job and their measures of success, remote works really well.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, guys.
So other questions, feel free to unmute. If you want to show video, feel free. We're all friends here.
We did get a question. Oh, I got one privately. What if we don't have customers yet? Do you have a good method for getting to the customers of legacy competitive firms? And that was from Casey Harmon.
Good question.
Okay. You want me to take a stab at that?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was using the word customer throughout, but obviously if you're a startup or you're thinking of a product in a white space, if you're an existing company, what you're trying to think about is a target audience. Who do you want to create value for? And obviously getting a hold of people, is I'm not gonna lie, it can be a challenge sometimes. So a couple of things we do. Obviously, we pay incentives because people value their time. So we will offer an incentive to get them to spend typically about an hour is what I don't try to go over that. And then I don't necessarily always target, we do sometimes target competitors, but really it's people who are doing the job. And so, if you don't have a product, obviously sometimes the competitors, they do it themselves, right? They don't actually hire a direct competitor solution. And, so if you think in a broader terms of talking to people who are doing the job, it's not just like I need to find customer of this company. I want to find people who are doing the job. In other words, they're in the market, right? Because they're in this audience and they're doing the job. And when I do these, I look for a diverse group. So I want people who have hired maybe one competitor solution. Maybe I want people who have never done that and do it themselves. Maybe I want people who are who have bought one product and switched to another, because they all have different perspectives in the job and what they're trying to get done. But remember, we're not focused on the solution. So we're not asking them, what do you think about competitor A, B, and C's solution? We're talking to them about the job and how they measure success in getting it done.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Zach. I was going to say the way I would do it from a competitive standpoint, if I was really trying to get the viewpoint from people who presumably are using a competitive solution, I would still focus more on the job. Maybe I try to find out ones, if I know these are customers of said competitor, still approaching it from the job they're trying to get done. How are they accomplishing that today, which is most likely the competitor could help you understand the areas of dissatisfaction that they have with the competitor without really demonstrating that, hey, we're going to directly compete, right? It's really more of a true research effort. So focusing more on them. I mean, I think what I've found is people love to talk about themselves and their needs, their challenges, their problems. They don't really want to talk about my solution and my product. That's my job, to figure out how to translate their needs into something that is better to help them achieve their goal. And I think that's some of the orientation change that this really brings, which I find to be really healthy, because it is a very problem first, customer first approach. And so even in doing research, I think it can be applied and be really valuable in how you do that research or talk to prospective market research that can be helpful.
And I'll just add this one thing is there are market research companies out there who have panels who can help target. And so, different ones have different, there are panels for medical, there's panels for legal, there's panel, right? So there are people who actually aggregate names of people willing to do market research as well. So that's another avenue. Plus social media, right? These days, everyone's online. LinkedIn is a great place to target specific, especially B2B type thing, right? I want to find someone. So there's some easy, and I've had people who use Facebook, and you, as you said, Carey, used Craigslist. So there's different ways to reach out. The two things, I think, a little bit of incentive. People do enjoy, if they know you're not looking for something confidential, they do enjoy talking about the job. In fact, people ask me, is it hard to get people to talk? Usually I have to get them to end at an hour.
Yeah.
They enjoy it, right?
That's
I mean,
right.
I'm not judging them. I'm just getting input from them, and they enjoy that.
Yeah. And even, that's right. And especially if it's done under research, I agree. I mean, I've seen it across all categories of types of people.
So a question came in from Claudia. It says, is there a risk to getting information that's too regional? If I start with interviews in California when I'm looking to go national, could that skew my customer job insights?
Very possibly could.
Yeah. So my comment on this, and I hit on it quickly, but I'll say it again. But when you're gathering the needs, you do want to go broad. What I mean by that is, imagine if you wrote down dimensions by which you would say your customers are diverse. So regionality, where they are, obviously could be a big deal depending on what the product or type of customer it is. Like for that first American who does doing mortgages, there's different rules in each state. So definitely we wanted to talk to different states, and then the other thing is, maybe, you I don't know if you're talking to business, maybe you want to talk to people in bigger companies and smaller companies, because they have different levels of resources. So you have to think a little bit about elements of diversity. Your goal is to hear the needs in the first step. So you want a diverse group, You're not trying to judge them in that first set as you map the job and gather the needs. Later on, when you go to prioritize it, you want to start with your target audience. So if you're going to start in California, it's okay to get a prioritization in California so that you understand that. But of course, as you think about expanding nationally, you'd want to get a diverse perspective nationally too. So there's some things to think about here. It's not just one way to do it. I don't know if Carey, you want to add anything to that?
I totally agree. I think it's understanding the potential risks, even just that notion, Claudia, of could regionality play a factor is a good recognition. I did one several years ago where I was studying people with regard to their financial habits and money use. And what I quickly realized was that income level here in Southern California had to be the minimum income level to be able to do some of the things that we were thinking about was going to have to be substantially higher than potentially in other parts of the country. So just as one example. So I think thinking about where a smaller subset could lead you in the wrong direction is at least the first step, recognition.
Yeah, and the goal is having a complete set of needs. So that's why diversity is so critical.
Yep.
So you don't miss stuff. So what kind of incentives? So that actually varies by the audience. That's what Grayson asked. Consumers, I can find, $25 Starbucks or Amazon card is probably sufficient. Maybe sometimes 50 if it's, but if you're talking to physicians, you're talking about $200 and $250 per hour. So it really varies by whether it's consumer or professional. Mm-hmm. I talked to those dealerships, right? I've done a lot of studies for dealership. You're talking to the owners of those, what they call dealer principals. I had to pay them $500 for an hour. That was the highest I think I've gone. So it varies. I always say start lower and then you can always move up, right? It can get expensive. The other thing to do is just appeal to their willingness to help, especially if you do have a product in the market or they know who you are. You say, look, we're looking for help to improve this. Help us to help you, right? And so sometimes doing that is helpful too, especially if you have a product. If you're an entrepreneur, you can still use that angle. Like, we want to improve this product, so help us so that we make your life easier. So that and along with, a dollar amount, some of it's just you need to test, see how people respond.
Yep. We had another one. How does this apply to a situation where you have identified a broad need / problem that you think needs solving, but need to hone in on exactly who your best audience might be? So how would you think about that one?
So you've identified a broad need. I guess I almost want to clarify.
Everyone, every consumer. I mean, Rudy maybe shared a little bit more context, but I think the idea is like this is every consumer potentially could be in need of this. So how would you start paring down to maybe an ideal first target audience?
Yeah. So, I mean, typically, going back to the idea of jobs to be done, we want to find people who are doing the job. There's people who just don't do the job. Let's say, we study for consumers managing, savings, right, was for TD Bank, and because they want to improve their deposit products. Well, there's plenty of people who are unbanked, who, so those wouldn't be people in the target audience. There's some people who maybe outsource everything to somebody else, right? Like a financial advisor in that example. So again, they wouldn't be people who are doing the job because they're not involved. So typically what you would think about is if there's a need, and you have to be careful of separating a need from a solution here. But if there's some need or job, like, you would say, okay, who's doing the job? That's who I want to talk to. And then think about what are the elements of diversity of people who are doing that job, to think about who that best audience would be. I'm trying to think of that.
Yeah. I mean, Rudy, this is where maybe you marry something like the crossing the chasm adoption curve as you think about something that, there are going to be early adopters and I would think about it in Zach's example of people that are maybe doing a related job today. I mean, Zach and I have talked over the years that, when there's broad invention, like a new job is being created, that this may not be the best approach, but that's not a broadly common situation.
Well, can I give you a,
Yeah.
can I give you a specific, sort of specifically? I mean, I've been a media producer for a long time. So, for instance, right now I've been working on a project, and there's a big need for people to, I think, to start to help to understand how to deal with change, right? And there's changes in being thrown upon all of us right now, and people don't understand how to do it, and it's creating a lot of fear. So when you make a media product, you should always, one of the rules is know your audience, right? But that's too broad of a thing. It's like, am I talking to senior people? Am I talking to people who just, have a need, like I just got taken out of a job, or what? How do you, because it seems like if you could figure out, it's not a solution first, really. It's like, okay, here's a group of people that we know have this kind of problem. So then you would go talk to them and see what would solve that particular problem for them specifically.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
So, yeah, that does make sense. So this is what I would recommend in that situation. So manage change could be the job, right? Which is kind of broad. You'd have to map it out. But let's say you do that and you get their measures of success. How do I manage change? And I guess you would say personal change, right? Versus organizational change, for example. So you could get a set of needs, and then, and I've done this quite a bit when clients don't really understand like who the target is. We'll actually survey, and in this case, actually surveys work quite well because we'll get a broad audience of people to rate the needs. And then I'll actually, after the fact, and I ask questions in the survey to profile people. So what's your age, demographic stuff, psychographic. Then you can actually start analyzing the data and saying, are there differences between, young versus old? You can actually start mining the data and say, does the importance and satisfaction in satisfying these needs of the job differ by different audiences? And so then having in mind the solution, is there certain needs that you're going to address, and you say, well, that's the target audience, right? So you would actually kind of go into it more broadly, study the job, get the needs, and actually get a wider set of people rating the needs to figure out, is there a subgroup that really has a bigger pain point? That's how and I've done that. We've done that a number of times actually for clients. It's not, I did a project for the U.S. Army, and we did a job the job was to conduct reconnaissance for the military. And so, we did a broad, like there's all kinds of reconnaissance done in the military. But one of the things they found as we did this broad is that soldiers who were on foot had very specific pain points that were unique to like soldiers who are in a truck or in an airplane or something. And so as you think about solutions, you'd want to make it specific to that audience. So the people who are on foot, or they call it dismounted, right? You create solutions for that specific context in doing the job. So it's a great way to think about it. But if you're not sure, you start broader and use the data to sort of help inform you.
All right. Thank you.
Does that help?
Yeah. Yeah.
Good question.
Any other questions? We're up against the hour, but happy to stick around for anybody that has them. We will make we can make the recording and the deck available as well, and happy to connect anyone with Zac if you want to talk to him, and I will continue to beg him to do some follow-up as well. So any other questions? All right, certainly would love feedback on the content, feedback on the format, the details. Certainly not on Zac and I's presenters, but everything else is available for comment. So I really hope it was helpful, everybody. And we're at a really interesting time. I look at this as hopefully a different way to think about how you could potentially start something. I've had a few conversations in the last couple months with people who have thought about becoming entrepreneurs and maybe didn't have that idea. And I challenged them and said, you could start with a customer, potentially a customer in a context that you would really enjoy working with, waking up in the morning and knowing that's who you were out to help, and go study them and go study how you could find something that is a need that they have to get jobs done that they're not happy with today. And that could be the place to actually go start a company. And so I think it's a completely alternative way to think about that. That's not normal, something that Zac and I both believe in. And I think we'll see really attempted and tested sometime this year. So if you're interested in that, I'm happy to continue that conversation as well. So thank you everybody for joining us, and stay healthy and be safe.